You don't need fancy project bags or expensive stitch markers to be a real knitter. When so much of our time is spent on buying and acquiring, we have less time for making. We've all seen them, the pretty bags and baubles and trinkets that we like to call knitting notions. The stitch markers that sparkle and shine like they belong on a charm bracelet. Those eye-catching project bags that seductively hint at all the on-the-go knitting we can get done. And even the knitting tools that are purportedly designed to help us, but that can actually hold us back from becoming better knitters. So what if we start saying no? Or maybe just no more? Or maybe simply not so much? In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, businessman Stephen Covey famously asserted, "The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing." Well, the main thing in knitting is the knitting. That means the stitches and the techniques. And the fabric that results from the deceptively simple but always fascinating combination of those stitches and techniques. That's what drew us to the craft in the first place. So why are we spending so much time and money focusing on all of this peripheral stuff? Because let's face it, the bling often comes up short. For example, I bought these stitch markers because I love cats and all things cats, and I just couldn't resist the sight of them. But here's the catch. It turns out they're too wide. I ended up with gaps between the stitches on either side of the stitch marker. So I made them into progress keepers, which I almost never use, which brings me to those stitch markers that serve as tools. The ones that we can attach to tell us which is the front side of the fabric and which is the back side or the wrong side. The ones that can tell us whether to make one left or make one right. I would argue that those kind of tools actually cultivate learned helplessness. If you mark everything, you don't go through the process of learning how to read your knitting. You want to know how to look at a fabric and know which side is the right side and which side is the wrong side. And you need to get so that you understand which way increases and decreases are going to lean, because that's why you choose them. You also want to get so that you know how to count the number of rows between increases and decreases. You're going to have to live with the finished object without the bag, without the bling. So what do I use? I have a couple of bags that I purchased many years ago from Tom Bin. I also have several tote bags that were either gifted to me or that I acquired at a deep discount at some point. And I used very basic stitch markers that probably cost me roughly 5 cents a piece, as opposed to $2 each. And actually, I can't help but wonder if my approach is one that a lot of other knitters share. Lately, there's been a lot of talk in the knitting community about how expensive knitting patterns have become and whether they're worth it. The commentary on this issue always seems to revolve around the question of value. Why should knitters pay for a pattern if that pattern is simple or straightforward? Or what if it's just transferring a popular design from one knitted object to another? The common complaint that I see is, I don't want to pay $12 for that. I can make that myself. But my question is, are those people paying $12 for half a dozen stitch markers, or 5 or 10 times that amount for an expensive project bag? At the end of the day, it all comes down to personal preference. I, for one, would rather pay a designer for a pattern because the value that I get from a pattern is the chance to learn more about the craft itself. Knitting patterns always keep the main thing the main thing. Social media can create a false sense of urgency, prompting us to buy objects that are really just status symbols in disguise. My advice to any knitter, whether they're new to the craft or a seasoned maker, is to always try to keep the main thing the main thing. Devote your precious time, effort, and money to the knitting itself, not to crafting consumerism.